Susan's going. Would you mind just like in like 10 minutes to make sure it's still going? Because there was.
Check it?
Yeah, just check it. Just like
If
lean
it's
back.
not, I'm.
You can just yell at
hitting
me.
that. Okay.
Just yell at me,
Okay.
and then I'll fix it.
We did one, but I'm sorry.
Oh, she was, yes. Yes, so
We're not using it.
you joined the church after she left.
All right, friends, we're going to go ahead and get started. I think that the ice scared most of us away. So I think we're a smaller but still wonderfully mighty group
You staying?
today.
No, I gotta go.
She has to go. Yeah, she's got to go direct the choir.
Audrey, let me make the announcement on this.
Oh no! He's going to
Phil
be very bad.
Scaduto is usually our coffee person. Phil can't be here today. He delegated it to me. I cannot find our coffee maker anyplace, so we're going to have to do this without coffee.
Don't
I'm sorry
worry
about
now.
that. I'm sorry about that.
Why don't you run to
And
Dunkin'
the
and
responsibility is all mine.
Go down to Dunkin' Donuts.
We do have donuts.
Yeah.
There's donuts in
Yeah.
theology. We never, and we never said it was donuts coffee in theology.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
Do you know I copied this title from a friend of mine who named theirs Coffee in Theology, but I don't really like coffee, and so I make donuts in theology. So yes, for this week it's good that it's not Coffee in Theology.
I bet you can call it donuts and dogma.
Donuts and dogma! I love the alliteration. All right, friends, we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about this lovely person named Kate Bowler. Have folks read her before, or at least, yeah, I think all of us have. So some of the bio may be repeat, but I think some of the other things might be at least a little bit new to some of us. So we're going to open with a prayer, actually a blessing from Kate Bowler, a little bit of an introduction or a reintroduction. We have a few different video clips throughout about everything happens, what that means about her book and her blog. We're going to have some conversations, some excerpts from her books, and looking at some of the blessings that she's been most recently writing. And if we have time, we might write our own little blessing at the end for ourselves. So let's go ahead and get started with this blessing for learning to delight again. So let's pray, friends. Blessed are you, the pragmatic, you who have run the math and know what adds up and what doesn't. You have set it all down. You who don't hope or dream or plan anymore because what's the point? Blessed are you, learning to live here. Your world has shrunk. Pain or grief or fear has sucked up every bit of oxygen from the room, and every ounce of delight has been squeezed from your hands. But blessed are we, who discover that even in the smallness our attention might compress even more. We who pull out a magnifying glass to discover, to notice, to taste, to smell, the small joys and simple pleasures that make a life worth living. You who wear the fancy blouse because it makes you feel nice, long after you thought your body was worth decorating. You who eat the over-the-top meal because that is what today can afford. You who make the memory and plan the trip and who snap a picture because we know that this one, wild, precious life might cost us everything. So why not make it not just bearable, but beautiful? Amen. So that's one of Kate Bowler's blessings from this book, The Lives We Actually Have, which is one of her more recent books, although Marcia has her most recent one, if you want to hold it out, Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day. So she's really good at titles, or she has a really good team who are good at titles. So I want to give a little bit of an introduction to Kate for those who might know her but need a little bit of a reminder. We're going to be exploring Kate, who's a theologian, historian, and storyteller, whose work has touched so many people. I feel like every Instagram pastor posts something that she has written at some point or another. Some of the things that she looks at is navigating faith, suffering, and joy. These are dichotomies of two things at once. She's a 4-time New York Times bestselling author. I have 3 of her books here which have won that. An award-winning podcast host and an associate professor of American religious history at Duke University, where she received her PhD. There she specializes in Christianity in North America, particularly the prosperity gospel, which is the belief that faith can bring you health and happiness and success. But this is not her belief system. She grew up Mennonite, so very different space that she lived in her upbringing and in her current faith life. Her academic research led her to her very first book called Blessed, A History of the American Prosperity Gospel, which examines this movement which shaped modern Christianity. So these are a few of her books, which she has many more writings, and I think we're missing maybe 1 or 2 books here. Kate's work took a deeply personal turn, which many of you may know. When she turned 35, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And suddenly all of her theological questions moved into different questions as she studied suffering and divine favor and the human limitation. In her best-selling memoir, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, she shares her journey of grappling with faith in the face of an uncertain future. Her writing is raw and funny. As we read in that blessing, we have this very funny wit, which is kind of unexpected. I don't know many people who write exactly in this way. And it can sometimes be a little like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that in a prayer. Oh, there's her. A picture of Everything Happens for a Reason. I can't even tell you the number of people who've commented on this book, but we have one quick quote from Bill Gates here: heartbreaking and surprisingly funny. So again, these 2 things together in her books. In her books, as well as in her personal story, she also involves a lot of folks who we might have heard of, especially in her podcast, which she named Everything Happens. There she interviews faith leaders as well as celebrities and other voices, including authors, activists, and celebrities. I have a couple listed here. N.T. Wright, theologian, you may have heard of him. Adam Grant, Morgan Harper Nichols, Alan Alda, and Savannah Guthrie are just a few of those people who she's interviewed on her podcast. Her later books, which I think were 2021 and 2022, if I'm not mistaken, No Cure for Being Human, which is under here and looks like this, as well as The Lives We Actually Have, which we read from a moment ago, continue to explore all these themes, offering wisdom for those who are struggling with the unpredictability of life. Kate's work reminds us that faith is not about having answers, but about learning to live fully even in the face of uncertainty. I had to grab this little quote of how she describes herself from her website, which I thought was particularly funny. So I'm going to read to you her perspective on herself. Hi, I'm Kate. Let's untangle our culture's obsession with toxic positivity and self-help, shall we? I am a Duke professor, podcaster, and author with a single mission: giving you permission to feel human, and letting you have whatever weird or boring hobbies you can't explain to strangers. Do I love roadside attractions and exotic potato chip flavors? Yes, more than I should say. I believe that the world would be a better place if we took apart the well-meaning cliches we use when life is hard. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Maybe what doesn't kill you might try again tomorrow. Smiley face. After years of being told I was incurable, I was declared cancer-free. But there's no going back. I am forever changed by what I discovered. Life is so beautiful, and life is so hard for everyone. So we're gonna take a look at this video from Kate, which gives a little bit more of an introduction and about the title of her podcast.
So I call the book Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, because there are so many lies I didn't realize that I was just completely obsessed with. Like, the first was that I can outwork any problem. Like, I once lost use of both my arms because of this nerve thing, and I did my entire dissertation, which is to say I wrote a book with no arms on bad dictation software. Like, I just think I can outwork anything. So that kind of came to a crashing halt when I got stage 4 cancer. As it turns out, I do not have a lab in my house and I cannot cure cancer. So I just came to the end of myself really fast and realized no, I cannot outwork every problem. The second I got sick and everyone rushed in with their reason, I realized how much I had secretly loved the idea that everything has a purpose and maybe everything happens for a reason. And so just to realize that not everything is like a boomerang where you send it out in the world and it comes back to you, that some things are just tragedies that show up at your doorstep. I realized that and I guess this is the third lie, is that I'm not special. And yes, I'm special to my parents, and I'm a beloved child of God, but I'm not special insofar as I am not the exception to the rule, that sometimes bad things just happen. So yeah, bad things happen, and it happened to me. And that was hard to get through.
So I'd like to ask all of you, what's the most ridiculous reason that someone has ever given you for something happening? Or that you've witnessed somebody else that they've experienced? A reason for something happening. Oh, it was because of this.
I have one.
Yeah.
When my sister was dying, she, there was another woman who, why is she better? Why does her cancer go away? And she was drinking that alpha water or whatever, not the woman was. So we bought her alpha water because, okay, we'll get you the water. She goes, well, because she has a very strong faith. I said, Kathy, don't you ever listen to anybody tell you you don't have a strong enough faith. So I gave her a diamond cross as a bling gift and said, don't you ever let anybody else, and you wear this, and then we'll give it to Megan, her daughter, when we're finished with it. Yeah. Don't you ever listen to anyone, you have a very strong faith. Yeah. It was just so different, the person had a different out there, presentation of what she was doing. Kathy was always more just inner.
Yeah.
Quiet and spiritual.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, tell her that you don't have a strong enough faith and that's why you're gonna die of cancer.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. Yeah, Clara.
My girlfriend was going through a difficult time with their family business, and they were gonna lose everything, and then she got breast cancer. And people said to her, because she shared this with me, God doesn't give you more than you can handle.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
And she was just, she was just on the ground.
Yeah.
And
That's another one.
yeah,
Yeah.
it just,
Yeah.
it was me, it
Yeah.
just seemed, oh, you can handle it,
Yeah.
because you're strong.
Yeah. No, it's so wrong, because how is that going to help anything? It's not supporting the person. Wouldn't I love you work so much better, to support her.
We talk about this sometimes in Stephen ministry, right? I mean, and universally, we find it hard to listen to. Everything happens for a reason. Oh yeah, what's the reason? Why would a loving God decide to do this to that person? Yeah. And another one is, God doesn't give us anything we think.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, I went to a church. Youth from all over came, and somebody in our group said, I don't wear a seatbelt because when God says my number's up, it doesn't matter.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, you probably had something that you wanted to say to them, but I imagine you didn't. Yeah.
Well, make sure you're not in the car with that person.
God wouldn't want me in that car.
All right, I'd like for us to look at, so what not to say. So we named some of those things, but this is a brief, it's about 6-minute interview with Kate Bowler about her experience of what not to say. Did everybody hear the video before? Okay, I'm gonna turn up just a wee bit because I think this one's a little bit quieter. So we're gonna listen to this one and reflect.
Memoir, written by a young mom diagnosed with incurable stage 4 cancer while her son is still a toddler. I mean, it is hard to imagine this could be funny, right?
I remember when I walked into the cancer center for the first time and someone was actually playing a harp. And I immediately turned to my dad. I was like, oh God, is it this bad?
That is the voice there of Kate Bowler. She is the author of a new book that is called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. She spoke to Rachel Martin.
Suddenly at 35, I get this stage 4 cancer diagnosis and it was just like a bomb went off. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, did I actually maybe expect that everything was gonna work out for me? And so I wrote the book more like a theological excavation project. Like I was just trying to get down to like the studs of what I really expected for my life. And I think I was a lot more sure than I realized. Sure of what? Well, maybe that I was the architect of my own life, that I could overcome anything with a little pluck and determination. Oh man, I really thought like, I mean, God, you're great, and my job is to be good, and then there's some kind of relationship between yeah, we're making a deal, and I will be awesome, but you will be awesomer, and like somewhere in the middle. Yeah, that's right. And that like, I kind of pictured my life like it was this life enhancement project, and like my life was like a bucket, and I'm supposed to put all the things in the bucket. And the whole purpose is to figure out how to have as many good things coexisting at the same time. And then when everything falls apart, you totally have to switch imagination. Like maybe instead life is just vine to vine, and you're like grabbing onto something and you were just hoping for dear life that it doesn't break.
How did that then manifest in your relationships with friends and family?
Well, I think maybe
I'm so sorry. Buffering a little bit.
I realized a little too late that sometimes it's people's love for you that makes them want you to be as certain as they hope to be. You know, like because the diagnosis was so bad and I went from feeling like a normal person to all of a sudden like this spaghetti bowl of cancer, I was trying to learn how to give up really quickly. Like looking at my beautiful husband and just immediately trying to say all the stuff you're supposed to say, which is just like, I have loved you forever. And all I want for you is love. And then you're trying to learn how to give up these, like you have these impossible thoughts, like you will live without me, and like please take care of our kid. And like you're trying to do all that hard work. And then in the same moment, they're trying to rush in and say like, we're gonna fight like this, there's all these plans. Like they wanna pour their certainty in to like remake the foundation. And there's this kind of almost terrible exchange where you're trying to remake the world as it was, but like it's all come apart.
How did you move from that moment and at the same time rewinding? Because you do have to do the work.
Yeah, that's
Like you gotta show up, you gotta go to treatments.
Yeah, and like I don't think I knew how to live after certainty. And part of it is you have to learn to be present even when things are absurd.
Because you wrote about your diagnosis and your treatment in the New York Times, It opened you up
Oh my word.
to a whole slew of feedback, we
Yes.
can call it.
Yes.
Some feedback from readers who had all kinds of things to say to you. And a lot of it, and most of it, right, came from such a good place.
Yeah.
But some of it was insensitive,
Yeah.
I suppose, could be a word that's used. You divided the feedback into 3 categories, the minimizers, the teachers, and the solutions people.
Yeah.
Would you mind just giving us a snapshot of each?
Oh, sure. Well, minimizers, they rush in with well, at least you found a good hospital. At least you're on this drug. At least you're not entirely bankrupt. Oh man, minimizers. Yeah, and then there's the teachers, and very often they've recently watched a documentary, and they have a lot to share with me about what they just learned. And like you find yourself immediately going into a moment where you realize that like you're maybe part of a multi-level marketing presentation you didn't sign up for, like essential oils. So yeah, there's always a teaching moment. And then
The solutions.
right, solutions, I think they're just like trying to help me get back to a sense of agency. But the problem is it's usually like what I think of as like the tyranny of prescriptive joy. It's always like an emotion they want me to have or a prayer they want me to try, but like there's something I haven't tried, and if I would just put my shoulder into it, I would finally do it. And I just want to tell them, like, every time, I promise I'm trying my very best, but like cut me some slack.
Right. It is interesting because there's a conversation that you have with a doctor. There are a lot of conversations you have with doctors in this book.
Yes, I do. There's one.
Near the end, a pretty wise man who looks at you and says, listen, we're all gonna die. Like, we're all terminal.
Yeah.
You just have more information. So I guess my question is, how have you learned to manage that information?
Yeah, I try really stupid stuff. Like, I got terrible news a couple months ago, which thankfully turned out to be a medical error.
A scan that you had or something?
Yeah, it was a scan and it looked brutal. But like, I spent that week thinking like, this is my last year for sure. And it was weird because the next day I turned to a friend and I said, would you like to go visit the world's largest Ukrainian sausage? And he was like, oh, I'm in. Yeah, like absurd, delightful, like the real stuff.
There are a couple very helpful appendices at the end of this book.
Oh, well, thank you.
First, a list of things not to say to someone with terminal cancer. And I gotta say, I read this and felt pretty good about myself. I was like, oh yeah, I never say that, never say that. And then I got to number 8 and realized that I have totally said this.
Oh, it's so tough though.
This is, when you ask, you feel like you're being, you're getting right in there.
Yeah.
Like I was giving myself credit for asking this question, how are the treatments going and how are you? And like looking deeply into someone's eyes and being like, no, I'm not like the other people in your life. Like, I really want to connect with you. Tell me how it's going.
Yeah.
And this is not a good thing.
It's, well, as I write, this is the toughest one of all. I can hear you trying to understand my world and be on my side, but picture the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Got it? Now try to put it in a sentence. Now say it aloud 50 times a day. Does your head hurt? Do you feel sad? Me too. So let's just see if I want to talk about it today, because sometimes I do, and sometimes I want to hug and a recap of American Ninja Warrior.
Kate, thank you so much for talking with us.
Oh, what a treat.
That is Kate Bowler. Her book is called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. She also hosts a new podcast that
it's so funny. When I was looking for clips for us to watch today, I watched this one that I showed all of you, and then maybe an hour later I found this other video of this woman who asked, "How are you? How are you really, Kate?" And I was like, "You didn't listen to this other video." So I thought that was kind of funny. What did you hear that was maybe new that you hadn't heard from this video that Kate talked about?
I like how she said, think of the worst things that ever happened to you.
Yeah.
And say it over and over and over again because you hadn't heard.
Yeah.
So, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I know. I think that's one of the best ways that we can put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, to really think about what would that be like. So many of the really bad things happen to us, people don't know went on, or maybe they have a little information, but they don't know exactly.
Yeah.
But with something that's, well, in her experience, you know, a lot of people knew what was going on, you know, to have somebody over and over ask you, it's really hard.
I thought how hard it is to be of help,
Mm-hmm. To be what?
of help,
Oh,
be of help. And I think we want to be of help, but we'd also like to avoid a Vietnam-style quagmire, you know, where we say, I'd like to be of help, but I don't know if I'm ready to go all in.
Right.
In an unconditional commitment to help,
Yeah.
which is a human calculation too.
Mm-hmm.
You've got perhaps a spouse or a significant other, you've got children, maybe you've got a job, maybe you've got an aging parent, so there have to be limits on the help.
Yeah.
And yet, she's in an existential crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and chances are anything you say is not going to be that helpful. So where does that leave you? I don't know
What
the
do you
answer
say
is.
then? Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is.
I know. One of my my most favorite professor in seminary. She died of cancer. It was about 1.5 years ago now. And she had this blog where she said, "Here's the thing today that somebody said that was not helpful." And you know, many of the things that we have listed here. Yeah.
When my dad was dying, the last month of his life, I was in Connecticut, he was in Ohio, and whenever I would call, I was like, "How are you?" You know, the daughter, the oldest one, I was just thought I had this responsibility.
Yeah.
And I learned at his wake that one of his friends used to call every day, and they would pick a year, and then they would remind each other and laugh about who were the Cleveland Indians, their beloved baseball team, who would play first base that year, second base, shortstop, and so on. And they would, you know, rack their brains and laugh. And this man was telling me the story after Dad died, and I thought, oh, how great. He took his mind off, you know, and he took the time, and my dad was laughing with him. And they didn't have to talk about what was obvious. Just enjoy the day they had.
Yeah. To be present, right, and to show up, which I think is so often we don't show up because it's really hard to show up, you know, when something that bad is happening. Yeah.
Well, the irony is that so many of these stupid things to say are well intended.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
You know,
oh, they're all well
and they
intended.
just,
Yeah.
Like God needed another angel.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in a way, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
You know, but
It doesn't help because you're
Doesn't
just
help.
off the earth.
Yeah.
I thought of another one when our older daughter had a miscarriage. A woman I was working with at that moment was saying to me, "Whatever you do, don't say you can always have another baby." Because somewhere inside I wanted to say that, like, "Oh, it'll be okay, it'll be okay."
Yeah.
And she said, "I've been through it. Do not say that." There were so many times when the words were right there.
Right there on the tip of your tongue. Yeah.
And I was grateful she had warned me. Because she'd been
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a friend who lost her son, an adult son, and I think there's probably not a lot of things worse than a parent losing a child.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I had no idea what silence could mean if a friend came and just sat.
Yes.
We said nothing.
Yeah.
Be present,
Yeah.
that's it.
It's the most powerful gift that you can give, and the silences during our care team, we talked a little bit this past Thursday about silences and how, you know, it's going to be awkward. I'm someone who loves to fill the conversation as well. Like, you know, you're like, oh, this isn't good. Like, this is too awkward. You're like, we need to, you know, fill this space. But sometimes that's the most powerful thing, and the people who I've witnessed who've done that so well are the most impactful in caring for somebody. I'll never forget this. My pastor who I grew up with, who now is down the street, she works at the hospital. She's doing her residency down there. I'll never forget leaving. I was just meeting with her. It was when I was in seminary, and I was telling her about my seminary experience. And I left the room, and I was like, she said almost nothing to me. she gave me no information. You know, I was like, okay, what should I do? What are all the things I need to be doing as a seminary student? Where should I be applying to become a pastor? All of these things. And I was like, I felt so light and so happy leaving her office. And I was like, but she didn't say anything to me. There was nothing, but I feel so good, you know. And that's the kind of gift that we can give to people. Yeah.
So I take Rich's point about the difficulty of saying the right thing. But I find, in my experience, that it's best that you know that person and you have an idea of what would connect with that person. This is an odd story, but my sister was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, but she didn't admit it for a long time, and she swore her partner not to say anything.
Oh wow!
And she told Clara and me, "Oh, I just had pancreatitis. Like, it'll go away." And I heard this, and Earl, her partner, said, "She has cancer." And I thought, what could I say? And so I finally said, "Susan, you have cancer. Please admit it." And she hemmed and hawed, and finally she said, "Yes, I do." And I think that connected with her, that she was able to admit, certainly under pressure from me, she was able to admit that she had this disease and that she had to come to terms with it. It's not something I would have thought initially, but it connected. And I think that's so much, it's so true of all of us to make sure that we know enough about the person to say the right thing under the right circumstances. And often we don't, because we don't know enough.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, it is helpful, and that's why it's helpful for each of us to have our community, to have our people who we know they're going to say the wrong thing too sometimes, right? You know, they're not going to be perfect, because we're all not perfect. But they know us so well, they're going to support us in a way that might be helpful to us.
Just the fact that there's an element of mind reading in this
Yeah.
makes it withering. It's like before coaching, I would always have to pass a CPR, first aid course.
Yeah.
And I'd sit there for that hour and a half, getting ready to get down on the floor and, pump the dummy. And I'd just be sitting there saying, God, please don't ever let me have to actually do this. I'm gonna foul this up so badly.
Yeah.
And in some ways, when we examine this as we are this morning, you think to yourself, boy, if I could avoid anybody that I know being in a situation that's going to require me to exercise some discretion, I really appreciate that. Not just for the people that I know, but because I think I'm going to mangle it most
That's
of
a
the
great
time.
analogy.
Yeah. That's so good. So these are a couple of the things. Obviously, everything happens for a reason. Sometimes, this implies that suffering has a diverse logic that should be immediately understood, which can feel very dismissive to us. God needs another angel. This turns a person's deep loss into some sort of cosmic necessity, like this had to happen according to God. This is for me one of the hardest ones. I say at least. I catch myself. You were saying it's on the tip of your tongue. I'm like, and then I'm like, no, shut it down. Don't say it. It's minimizing it. It's minimizing what's happening in that person's life.
The one I oftentimes find I go to is for people around here. I'll say, have really good doctors and really good hospitals here in this area. But I think that's a minimizer.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, whoever the doctor is you're working with has got to be great.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical person. Who am I to say that?
Yeah.
I don't think this has been mentioned yet, but comparing your sadness or your worry. Well, but look at so-and-so.
Yes,
Look
yes,
at so-and-so.
yeah.
Yours is nothing compared to that.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can only feel what you are feeling.
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
feel what the other person.
And it doesn't make, whatever it is, it doesn't make yours any less.
No.
You're then making that person's into something that it may or may not be, you know, it's, everything is just as important, you know, just as important to God, which means it should be just as important to each other.
Is there a second slide of what not to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because
You think we got it?
I think it's something I always wind up going to, and it's never helpful.
So there's a whole bunch more. She talked about the appendix in her book, which I can photocopy for us. I meant to do that. So here's some others. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Love my Kelly Clarkson song. I use it to like pump myself up all the time. But after reading about Kate Fuller and her talking about this, I was like, I can't listen to this song anymore. Like this is sometimes suffering just makes us exhausted. It's not necessarily making us stronger, which is I think sometimes we want to say like, okay, no, this is good. It's making you a tougher person. No, sometimes it just like really kills us. Like it's really awful, and that's okay. You must be really special because God is testing you. This one I haven't heard as much. Have you all heard this? I haven't heard that one as much. Have you tried? So Kate talked about how we have all the teachers and the solution people. Have you tried X, Y, Z? But that's not helpful. It's unsolicited advice. We're not looking for folks to come up with a solution to our problem necessarily. And then maybe one of the hardest ones to hear is it's all part of God's plan. No, it's not. It's not part of God's plan. This can be so painful to think that God intentionally had this happen in our lives. God is
Is that something you think, or is that something you say to the person who has said a response?
It could, when somebody says, so this is what not to say, but you could also think that as well, but when people say, this is part of God's plan, this is, this had to happen kind of thing, for, not the best thing to say to folks. So, what can we say instead? So the list that Kate has is much shorter for what to say. But I think the phrase that she doesn't have in here is the silence. We can't say it. Presence. There's no words that that we can actually say, but it's equally important to these. So I'm sorry. This sounds really hard. You're going through a really hard time, and I'm sorry about that. I love you. I think that sometimes we forget to say that, we'll say it, but it's not like the first thing that we always go to, especially necessarily with friends and maybe people we don't know as well. And then I'm here with you. I'm with you now, and that gets into the presence and being together. Are there other? Yeah, John.
So I wonder. Both these things, or all these three things, are meant impliedly to get the person to talk.
Yeah.
Explain what are you feeling? Mm-hmm. And while it doesn't work every time, I've found that sometimes it allows them to speak openly about what they feel, and that is often some palliative help that you can't give them, but they've given themselves.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that these give us sort of a foundation that this is a safe place. I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to try not to say the wrong thing. This is a place of love here, and in that, then maybe more will be said, maybe they won't, and maybe we just need silence, which is also equally important. Another phrase that I love that Daniel says a lot is "tell me more." Something so simple as that. I'm not going to say anything. I just tell me more. What else is there that's going on?
one that's not up there,
Mhm.
and I raise it with a real question mark. I'm not saying it should be.
Mm.
I want to ask,
Uh-huh.
you're in my prayers, or
Mm.
I'm praying for you.
Mm.
I think that's a gray zone.
That's a hard one.
Why?
I think it's a gray zone because when people have said it to me sometimes, I've thought, oh my God, I must be in even worse shape than they thought. But more substantively, I think sometimes it's a shorthand catchphrase kind of
Dismissive.
thoughts and prayers.
Yeah,
You're in my
yeah.
thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
And I notice.
What if you really pray for them?
Yeah, and if I say it, I do.
Mhm.
But that's not the issue. The issue is it helping that person?
Mhm.
I noticed in the last few years, school shootings and things like that have happened. There's this growing public pushback, where you're seeing on social media and stuff like that. Don't tell us about your thoughts and prayers. Let's do something about keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous people.
Yeah.
That would help, but your thoughts and prayers don't
Mhm.
in that context. And yet, if I say that to you, it's not because I just thought it was a snappy kind of a good conversational thing. It's because I am, but I don't know how you receive it. I guess
Maybe
that's
it's
my
back to
concern.
what you were saying, you kind of have to know the person. So if you know somebody who's got quite an aversion to God and
Yeah.
the church or
Yeah.
something, you wouldn't necessarily say that, you'll just call
Yeah,
pray for the
yeah,
Father.
let's not go
Yeah.
there,
Yeah, I think it is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it also is impossible for us to know if those prayers have indeed helped the person. I don't know that, when I've said that, I don't know that the person has come back and said to me, it really changed everything for me. I really, so as a believer, I think, I'm like you, I think if you say you're gonna pray, then you darn well better do it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Does
It's
anybody ever say back to you, that helped?
They thanked me.
Which is a little different from that.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
My one son-in-law was gonna have some kind of minor surgery, and I gave him a hug as we were leaving, and I said, I'm praying for you and the surgeon tomorrow. And he goes, I don't believe in that stuff. And I said, again, I know him, I said, but I do, and I'm praying for you, and I love you. Because it wasn't, it's hard to explain except that I do believe it, and I do think it mattered, and it was my way of, I don't know, maybe comforting myself, I'm not sure, but it felt like the right thing to say. I took a chance saying it to him because I thought he might respond that way, but I was able to say, but I do, and I want you to know that I care for you so much, I love you so much. But another time, his dad died before he married our daughter. His mom died after the wedding. His oldest brother died, all in a short span of time. And we're at the funeral for his older brother, and he was distraught. And I didn't know what to say. And I sat next to him at some point, and I just leaned my shoulder to my elbow against him. Just sat next to him, and he leaned into me. And that was the silence of, it felt like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what spurred me when I said, I'm praying for your surgeon. The surgeon.
Yeah.
I wasn't as afraid to say that, but some people have said to me, thank you for the prayers. It did matter.
Yeah,
It's nice to
I
hear.
go back and forth on this all the time because whenever I, am communicating over text with somebody, about, if they're in the hospital or what have you, I can't physically pray with. I think the most powerful is to actually physically say, can we pray together, or even can we sit together in prayer in silence? Like you don't even need to say anything. Just pray together for a few minutes. But when you can't do that, you're not physically there with the person. I think you're right. I think that you have to know the person, because some people, it's like, oh, I know they're going, this is good. They want to know this, and they want to know people are praying for them. But then other times, it does sound just kind of like, well, like, who cares? Like, why, like, that's not helpful. So it's hard, and I think you're right, it's a gray area.
It is. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I don't know if it's because I'm now 2 rotations in Stephen ministry or what, but when I say I'm praying for somebody, and I am praying for those people, what am I praying for? And I think I'm praying that God will be interventionist enough to give that person some kind of inner strength or courage, and that God will be interventionist enough to mobilize the people that constitute the support group for that person.
Yeah.
To bring their best selves to that person.
Yeah.
But who knows if God is that interventionist?
Yeah. If only we knew, wouldn't it be helpful?
Wouldn't it just be easy to go on faith?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just like that one thing, and I'm a language nerd, tone.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the content and the words and the wording.
Right.
And Rich helped me with this week. Email and texting cannot convey tone.
Yeah.
Likewise, when we are physically with someone, for example, the 3 words "hang in there." Okay, that can be "hang in there." That could be
Hang in there.
I'm
That's
just
all you're
saying.
doing.
I'm just saying your
Yeah.
tone, your body language, your facial expressions, all are packaged with the actual words. Again, I'm not trying to be nitpicky. I'm just saying it's so delicate. It's hard.
Yeah.
So,
No, I always think it's really powerful to see the difference with like sermons or when like excerpts are read. That's why like with Capel or in a minute I'm going to have you hear her actually read one of her blessings, which was way more powerful than just reading it, because it's like, oh, now we know what she's saying, because of her tone of voice. But when you read like a sermon and then you hear the preacher actually preaching it, it's a different sermon. It's like, it could not be more different. And my husband is so wonderful, and he reads my sermons before I preach them. I'll say like, is this terrible? Like, and he'll be like, yeah, this isn't so good, but maybe it'll be better when you say it out loud. And sometimes like he'll say like, oh, it was so much better, like hearing you like say it, like it was not good like in written form, but it was okay,
Does he ever say, this sermon's not very good, but everything happens for a reason? Or God must just have wanted it that way.
Yes.
God's plan.
Yeah, exactly.
You can always preface your sermon. Woody said this isn't going to be a good one.
Hope you disagree.
How beat red he would get.
To Brian's point, when I listen to audible books being read, if the author reads them, it's a totally different experience.
Yeah.
It's just the words, but they wrote them.
Yeah.
Especially an autobiography.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Because they're telling me the story. It's like they're sitting in the car with me.
Yeah.
And talking to me.
Yeah.
Versus reading the words.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, we're running a little out of time, but I wanted to get to a couple more things, especially this one blessing that she reads for us. With all of this, in addition to her experience of, what does it mean to have stage 4 cancer, and how do people respond? How can we respond to people who are going through similar experiences? She talks a lot about, especially in her more recent books, about embracing the uncertainty, knowing that life is so bad sometimes, but finding joy in it, which is so hard. You have these two things which seem opposite, and yet how can we, hold these two things together? And so one of the things that, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. We're gonna read that. There's this wall down in Durham in North Carolina, which has this quote of Kate Fuller's up on the wall that says, "Life is so beautiful, life is so hard." and it's up there for everyone to see, and I think it's just really powerful, even though it's kind of like, well, choose a side, right? But at the same time, it's so true. We hold these two things together. So Kate often, talks about the, holding these things. I'd like for you to think of a moment in your life that sort of captured this. A moment that may have been really bad, but also really beautiful and good at the same time. So I'm going to have us watch this one, and then we may be able to watch one more in a second. So this is A Blessing for Uncertainty.
It's really hard to live in uncertainty. It's hard to live without knowing what's going to happen, and it's hard to live knowing that we won't always get the answers that we want, the meaning that we want, the stories that we need to be happy here. So here is a blessing for if you find yourself living in the gray. Blessed are you who live here, the space between simple categories and easy answers. You who wonder why this is your life, why you got this diagnosis, or why you still struggle with infertility, or why you haven't found your birth parents, or why you can't kick this addiction, or why your kids haven't come home. Blessed are you who build a home on uneasy ground, who, despite your trying, your asking, your searching, haven't found the satisfying feeling of discovery. And blessed are you who never will. This is not an easy place to live, outside of certainty, outside of knowing, outside of the truth. But blessed are you who realize that love and beauty and courage and meaning can still be found here, amid the unease and frustration and sleepless nights. May you be surprised by your capacity for ambiguity, for the way it makes you a great listener and a good friend, for you are someone who knows how to feel your way around in the dark and squint for the stars. I wish it were easier, dear one. I wish I could hand you the answers you seek. But for now, may you find comfort in the fact that you are not alone here in the gray. We are all learning to live in the uncertainty of the unknowing. So blessed are we who live here together. May you have a beautiful, terrible day.
So what is a moment for you that captured these two things? Both the bad, the terrible moments as well as the good moments. Yeah.
The terrible thing that happened, my mother, I guess I'll use the word, just dropped dead of a heart attack. And she had been ill for 5 years, dealing with hardening of the arteries. So she suffered.
Yeah.
So the terrible thing was her sudden death.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing was she was relieved of all the pain that she endured for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really, really terrible thing for you, especially, but it's also really beautiful to know that she doesn't have that anymore.
Right.
For me and Beth, my wife, who has cancer, it was just very simply the beginning of becoming grandparents coincided within weeks of her cancer diagnosis. And it was like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and oh shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just saying, and hey, I'm gonna take both.
Yeah.
I have to.
Yeah.
I have no choice.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny almost. You could say funny, you could say ironic. I don't know.
Yeah.
but it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I think it's beautiful and hard, right? Because, I mean, you have the ultimate joyful thing for so many of us, but then you have maybe the hardest thing that you've experienced.
It's not exactly what you're asking here, but I'm thinking of the term or the sentence, "This too shall pass." People usually say that when something is negative, but I also tell myself now, when things are joyful, this too shall pass. This doesn't last forever either.
Yeah.
So grab a hold of that and enjoy and appreciate the good things.
Yeah. Cherish what,
Because none of it, it's
Yeah.
terrible and beautiful all the time.
Yeah. I know. There's so many hard things happening, even if it's not in our personal lives, in our wider community, which may eventually impact us as well. But we can also hold these wonderful moments at the same time.
Look for the joy, look for the good things.
Yeah.
Look for them and hold on to them.
All right, I realize we're at the end of our time, and I have so many other things I wanted to read.
It's all our fault for being such an engaged audience.
Such a wonderful audience, such a wonderful audience. So we're going to close with this last blessing from Kate, a blessing for permission to feel it all.
Feel things big. And for the longest time, I felt so much shame because of it. I need reminders that my emotions are not good or bad, they're just information. You feel angry because this is unjust. You feel sad because this is awful. You feel tired because this is exhausting. Your emotions are not good or bad or lying to you or the entire truth. They're just giving you a bit of data that you shouldn't ignore. We love and lose and fall and get back up and fail and try again. This is what it means to be human, to feel the pain, the grief, the stress, the risk, the fear, the heartbreak. So you, beautiful creature, here is your permission slip to feel it all, to feel the joy and delight and excitement and sorrow and fear and despair, all the yellows and pinks and violets and grays, because you are the whole damn sky.
We will end our time with that. If anybody is interested in more of Kate's resources or her books, I certainly have recommendations, but also listen to her podcast, even if it's just a few minutes. There's a few really good ones that the recommended ones that are really good. So I encourage you to watch some of those. So thank you for being here, everybody. It's so good to be together. What's on the docket for next week? I can't even remember. We went through the whole schedule, and
Next, we are going to find out about the Italian painter Caravaggio with a guest lecturer named Dr. John Russo. Phil Scaduto has arranged that, and I think it's going to be really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll be really lovely. So be sure to come next week for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. We'll head on over to worship.
And next week, maybe there'll be coffee.
There will be. If I have to go to Dunkin' myself,
we survive. Well, so far.
Yeah. There will be coffee.
Maybe pass out of church.
But there will be, what was that movie? There will be blood?
Oh, no!
There will be coffee.
There will be coffee. There will be coffee.
I'll give you the sign.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
And I think it takes.
Okay, good. After that one.